on where you're logging in from. My name is Bunike Lee, and I serve as the chairwoman for the NAPAC Michigan chapter. For those that are new here and don't know what NAPAC is the Nigerian American Public Affairs Committee. It was established in 2011 with a mission to engage, inform, and empower Nigerian Americans in the United States through policy impact, education, health and wellness, effective advocacy, and economic empowerment. So again, thank you for joining us on the discussion about tackling the stereotypes within the African diaspora. In contemporary African American relationship, a lot has been said about these two groups in the United States. It is expected that since both are descendants from the same root culture, they will adapt and coexist in harmony. However, doubts have been raised on this coexistence and adaptation. The growing stereotypes, misconceptions, ignorance, grudges, and cultural differences are largely responsible for some of the strained relationships. The question is, can anything explain this reality other than these elements that I just mentioned? So the fundamental question this afternoon is, will this new generation of African American immigrants and African Americans form social, political, and economic alliances? The present situation poses a challenge in the African diaspora. So I'm going to have Mr. Akindele open the floor for us in a discussion. It's not necessarily a question and answer. It's more of a discussion that we're going to have about the issue and see if we can come to a medium. Of course, we will not be able to solve that problem fully today, but at least we can start a civil conversation. So Akindele, over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, and greetings to everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight during Black History Month, and I'll jump right into the session here. As you all know and recently heard, you have a gubernatorial candidate that's running for governor here in the state of Michigan, Austin Ching, who recently said that we should get rid of Black History Month. And I guarantee you that set off bells everywhere, not just in the African community, but in the African American community, where many African Americans were very offended of the very fact that a Nigerian national would publicly say we need to get rid of Black History Month. Now, oftentimes we've heard people like Morgan Freeman say something similar to these things, but for someone who's not born and raised here in the United States and most likely do not understand the struggles that African Americans have gone through for the past 400 years, it was a striking nerve. Also, we have groups out here like the American Descendants of Slavery. This is more of an underground organization that basically says Africans, they don't represent us. They need to take care of their own problems. African Americans can take care of our own problems. I don't understand why we're trying to come together. Oftentimes, I get into some of those discussions, unfortunately, and it's very heartbreaking, especially when you have folks like Congresswoman Karen Bass out of California representing the 37th district, who's the past chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, who is a friend of the African community, especially Nigeria, where her own constituents have a problem with her own African American constituents have a problem with her trying to work with Africans and trying to create one universal body in terms of Black people globally. We have folks, and then you have the stereotypes within our community. I'm always in these conversations with the stereotypes from African Americans, Africans, whether you have folks calling African Americans Akata or otherwise. It's just the tension is still there even in the 21st century. So, we want to open up this dialogue and set the tone on thoughts from the audience. The only thing I ask is for all of us to be respectful of each other's comments, whether you agree or disagree. And please keep your comments either to about 5 or 6 minutes. This is a 90-minute session that we're having tonight. This is going to be a robust discussion, and I'm going to open the floor to anyone who wants to start first. I have one question. I'll go first. I have a question. How come, from your point of view, why there's tension between African Americans and Africans in the 21st century, in 2021, with a new president? We have the first Black vice president. More and more people are talking about Africa. Why are we still at this trend, this situation right now?
This is Alex Tyre. I'm gonna go.
Sure.
This is yesterday. I wasn't aware of this meeting now, and it's so interesting. I happened to just catch it and I jumped on it. Last night, I was talking to one of our members here, Ademola Okusonya, one of the founding members of NAPAC. Many years ago, we were together in USC, and we used to have Black Students Union, and then we had the African Students Association, and then we had the Nigerian Students Association. And it occurred to me, I said, why do we have all these different organizations here? Black Students Union, they are the same as we are. And I told them, I said, look, we need to attend their meetings. Let's call them to attend our meetings too. So we did. And by the time we got out of school, we formed a group called LOPAN that preceded NAPAC. I'll get to my point. And when we had LOPAN, we had a kind of a conference or so with some African American organizations here at UCLA. And the topic of that was bridging the gap between Africans and African Americans. It was in 1993 at the UCLA campus. And that just went and we didn't do anything about it anymore. What I'm getting at is that this conversation is overdue, what we are talking about now, and we need to carry it further. Because when that guy running for governor made his statement, I was very incensed. And I said, he's not representing Nigerians, he's talking crap. Excuse my language. But I'm glad we are having this, and this conversation needs to go further. And to your question, why do we still have this type of tension going on between the Africans and the African Americans? I think it all stems from ignorance. And when I say ignorance, there are a lot of African Americans do not understand Africans. Moreover, a lot of Africans really don't understand the African Americans. And what you referred to earlier, the word Akata and all that nonsense that people use, I have cautioned my fellow Nigerians. I said, look, don't use that term, please don't. The people who sense that term, who use it, were people who came here, Nigerians who came here maybe in the 60s or so, and they've all been gone, 70s, and then they just passed it on. Some people use it, they don't know the meaning of the word, okay? There are different ethnicities in Nigeria. That particular word came out of the Yorubas, and some Yorubas don't even know the meaning. They just think it's something that used to refer to African Americans. Now, this discussion, we need to continue it and to clarify, our stance, our different stance, the Africans who've come here and the African Americans. There are a lot of people who really don't read. They are not in depth enough to know the history of African Americans, and that African Americans actually have paved the way for us Africans to come here and work and teach and do all kinds of things. And it is not supposed to be, we need to get to that point where there is the understanding, and it has to be a commonplace discussion in the barber shops, everywhere, for people to know that, no, Africans, we're all the same. We have the same, we simply came here differently, but we are all the same. So it is a very rife conversation to have, and it is overdue. Thank you.
Thank you. It is overdue. I agree with you 100%. And I like what you said, breaking down the walls of ignorance is through education. Anyone else want to chime in? Miss Joyce,
Good
you have the
evening,
floor.
everyone. Thank you so much, Akin, for putting this together. I do agree that this conversation is overdue. Many of us who schooled here in the US in the 80s, uh, I know I'm dating myself, but in college there was that dichotomy between Africans from the continent and African Americans here. And a lot of it was fueled by the erroneous historical accounts that the Western world and the images that the Western world were putting out there. But anyway, when I saw this pronouncement by this guy, I said, NEPAC, this is on you because you guys, I mean, this is the organization that I know that's been very vocal. We need to start putting things straight. When anyone misrepresents us as continental Africans, we need to start speaking up and do a press release and let people know, no, we don't stand for this. This is not how we feel. Because there are so many negative stereotypes out there about us. And if we don't do something to dispel that, they will continue, people will continue to have that perception about Africans, the erroneous perception about Africans that we're different or that we, you know, we think that we're better than African Americans, you know, rather than understanding that we are grateful to them for the sacrifices that their ancestors made, which has made it possible for us to have what we have now, you know, and including them in things that we do. I was looking to see how many African Americans actually were on this call. We need to do better because definitely this is a conversation that we need to have. And this erroneous perception that African Americans don't like I'm sorry, that continental Africans don't like African Americans and all that stuff, are things that we need to just push aside and just let people know that we all don't think this way. So that's just one thing I want to say. We need to start coming out there and challenging things that we don't like, things that are not true about us as continental Africans. Thank you.
Thank you. And I wanna go. I want to go before I get to Steve. I just want to say, put this out there as well. We're talking about continental Africans and Africans in general in terms of relationships. But what about personal relationships? Sometimes we have African Americans who date continental Africans in personal relationships and have been in personal relationships. What does that dynamic look like? But first, I'm gonna get to Mr. Steve, and I'm gonna open the floor with that question. You do have the floor.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for organizing this. I've been a read-only member for NAPAC, and I apologize. But this topic got my attention because individually, most of us have been having this conversation, and I'm happy that we're having it now as a group, where we now have a full platform that will be putting out press releases, like someone mentioned. The critical issue here is that most immigrants do not see how they benefit from privilege in America, even while belonging to a marginalized group. Some of us came here on the back of the struggle of those that were here before us to end slavery and get us like civil rights, and the work continues. The conversation has to be ongoing, and we have to be part of engaging with elected officials that are making certain statements that brings about this division. Get involved in any way through media or one form or the other that will give us like a larger audience where people hear what we are saying. We are not at war with African Americans. We are not at war with Africans. We are just at war with the institution that is dividing us, but we haven't come up to be one voice to push back on that institution, because they're creating the narrative that there's division amongst us when there is none. Black history is American history. Our struggles, when Blacks are liberated or get any rights, it is universal. So when they try to paint it to be like a Black struggle, we should be making it a human struggle for the things that we as Black people ask for in this space is what everybody is needed. And I ended up in this way because we as Black people are the ones that chose through religion to find the good that will benefit all. And it's high time we start holding also religious leaders accountable to speak in ways that will liberate us other than financial liberation. Economic empowerment is important, but it should not be from the pulpit. It should be about unity amongst us, and then we can now take that unity and go out into the society, get elected into offices, and have good policies that will benefit everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm gonna open the floor. I want to come back to your point on the politicians. I have a lot to say about that, and the church. But I'm gonna open the floor to whoever else want to follow up.
Hey, Kendall, this is Charmaine.
Hey.
I wanted to talk about what you were saying about the relationship situation. I'm African American. I grew up here in America, and my ex-husband, he's from Cameroon, and my children are half Cameroonian and half Black American. But I guess dealing with all identity issues, I grew up in Northern Virginia, which is just very ethnically diverse. We get a lot of diplomats. So I had Pakistan. I was just reflecting on this today. Pakistani friends, Vietnamese friends. I dated all, I call myself an equal opportunity lover. I dated all types of cultures. I'm a very, free spirit person, musician. So I've had, I've dated Puerto Ricans, I've dated Caucasians, white, Jamaican, African, Black American. And, it's interesting, when people, to me, always what I say is people are people. I think we definitely can talk about the difference between Africans and African Americans, but there's definitely cultural differences. I really definitely recognize there were just cultural differences. And it all comes down to your willingness to learn about each other, but also just the stress of the kind of jobs that we have as well. And plus there are many different factors on top of that. And I think for me, also was a difference. I think for us, it's not so much being African and African American, because to me, Africa is a continent, not a country, which a lot of people say. And my sister's actually, my brother-in-law, he is from Somalia. And then I had another brother-in-law from Ghana. So my family has definitely dated all types of people throughout the African diaspora. And it's not really just African, it's also an issue of class. I think that was the issue, the difference, because a lot of Africans who come over here, especially with my, are of upper middle class, and they have different expectations than, a lot of, African Americans, middle class and lower class. It's just a difference of values. I didn't think we're different because he was African per se, but more about he was upper middle class, and their value systems and how he grew up was very different than I did. There's certain things people would assume about our relationship, oh, he was controlling and all that, but he really wasn't. It was just, for me, his idea was that the children would be raised by a nanny. And that was his idea of what, both his mom and dad were very high up in the Cameroonian society. His father was a governor and his mom was, big. She was a daughter of the Mongo Williams tribe and all that stuff. And so his expectation of what a family looked like was different from us, not because he was African, but because he was an upper class, and where they had and his concept of family was the children were raised by the nanny, and both the mom and the dad were high-powered individuals. But that's not how I grew up. I'm from the South. And even for myself, dating Black men is always different because I'm different because I grew up in Northern Virginia. Again, the suburbs had, my father's a pastor. He's from the South. My upbringing is very different from guys in Baltimore, like the urban environment. Like I have more in common sometimes than white suburban guys. So I think it's just really about like understanding culturally where you guys are, but I don't necessarily think it has to be about your ethnicity. It really is about having common values, and we were just raised differently. Not because we're like bad or good people, but it's hard in Africa. I mean, that, growing up in an authoritarian society, having to survive that versus, America, especially the suburbs, is a little more free and you have different value systems. And that's my experience. I didn't always think it was because he's from Africa, but just other dynamics in our relationship, different identity issues. So that's my 2 cents.
All right. Thank you so much, Charmaine. I'm going to go to Tama Smith. Yes,
Good
ma'am.
evening, everyone. Hopefully everyone is fine. I just have a quick comment to make and a question at the same time, because it's just one particular statement that I always had an issue with, because as myself being an African American, I just never understood when I met individuals that are African American and have children with individuals that are born on the continent of Africa. Doesn't matter what country they're from. I just never understand why people say they're half American and half the country that their either mother or father is from, when we are all, to my belief, are saying that we are African born in America, even though we don't know exactly where we come from. And that's why people, do the DNA testing and all. But just for my own personal headspace, I just never understand how someone can say their child is half American and half Nigerian, just as an example. And if their father is Nigerian, why not just say the child is Nigerian and the child lives in America? Maybe I'm looking at it wrong, but it's just something that I never understood when I hear that. So if someone could shed some light on that, if I'm looking at it the wrong way, please correct me, but I just don't understand why people say that.
All right.
I guess I could chime in, Charmaine, is that, that I think my kids definitely feel the duality. I guess goes back to the Souls of Black Folks with W.E.B. Du Bois, that they feel the duality. Like when they come to my family's house, it's a different cultural style of how, because of America, where as a child, especially for children who need to navigate different parenting styles, Americans definitely a little bit more laid back in terms of what you're allowed to. And so my kids know, like around me or my parents, they can act a certain way, but they cannot act a certain way when they're in their father's house. There's a different expectations. And I think it's true. Like, and I think that's where the identity is, like, to help them understand that there's different expectations in the environments that they grow up in. It's not like, it's not a separation in a sense of, from a malicious standpoint, but more of, you need to know the culture that you're navigating. That's even true for me as a person of, I need to know I navigate differently than in Baltimore City than I need to do, different, down south there in the suburbs. When I'm at my parents' house, everybody has a different expectations. And for me, it's to help them, for them is to understand the expectations of the environments that they're going into.
Can I jump in?
Well, hold on 1 second. I got to go in order. I'm going to get Shegun, Adenia, and then Felicia Ware. Shegun, you have the floor.
Okay, good evening, everyone. How's everyone doing? First of all, this is a conversation that I know a lot of us have had in our homes. Let me just address comment that Tama brought up regarding half and half. So my mom's Caribbean, my dad's Nigerian, and I grew up in a home that had two different cultures. And when you're in a culture, people always make an assumption that when you live in a certain area, that they have certain expectations from you, right? Because as a Nigerian, my name is Shegun Ade, of course, anyone that knows me knows I don't really speak Yoruba fluently or at all, So they make that assumption, Shegun Ade, okay, he's Yoruba, so they start speaking Yoruba to me automatically, right? Or it could be something as simple as being Black in America. I came to school here in the US late 80s. And of course, it was a different time then than it is now. Of course, I don't know which one's better. But you'd have people walk up to you and say, I literally had someone say the word, "You don't act Black," right? Of course, I'm a Black man, but you don't act Black. And what I said, I don't understand what you're saying. You don't act Black. But what they meant to say is your culture is different because you didn't grow up here, right? So when you hear all these things, I think we need to go to another area, not individually, but more from a community base, where are we promoting our community strong enough? Is the media telling our stories? And I think that's the challenge we've had. I know in the early 80s, in the 80s, and then coming into the 90s, that started to change. And now it's even a lot better, where the stories back then were about starving children in Africa. Send them, if you donate $1, it could go a long way. But the stories now we're hearing of a lot of African Americans, like we heard about Stevie Wonder relocating to Ghana. You're hearing a different set of stories, but that's because more of us are telling our stories, either through Nollywood or individual film or through theater or through other forms of arts. And I think that's is very critical in having the conversation. So when I see someone like that young man in Michigan who's running for governor on a Republican platform, first of all, I knew that was a stunt. But the second of all, as a person, I look at what platforms has he been on in the past, and has he been a voice for a community? And since he's never been a voice for the community, immediately I cross him off because he's never spoken. He's never been on any other platform. This is the first time he's been in a forum where he's had the opinion to voice his opinion. That's his individual opinion. It doesn't speak for me, you, or anybody else. But if someone like Bonika Lee should say something, I would pay attention because she has been on several platforms and spoken, whether it's Nigerian or being Black. She's spoken, and I understand where she's coming from because she's someone that we see in the community and has made a huge impact. So I think those are very important as we grow as a community, is to make sure that we get the media, we get the tools that we need to continuously tell our stories, because that's what's happened in the past that's caused a division. And then secondly, we as people make better judgment calls and not just look at individuals who have not really been out there serving us as a people.
All right, thank you so much. Felicia, you have the floor.
Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be among you tonight. I did want to pivot a little bit and go back to an earlier comment or talking point. I think for me, as a Black woman in America, and then drilling down further than that, a Black woman living in Michigan, and then drilling even further down, saying I am from Detroit, I am from the East Side, I was raised on the East Side, I understand East Side things. I think that you have to understand that perspective to understand why there probably is this disconnect between Black people in America and the African continent. When you tell me that I am African, I don't know what that means. I'm not being facetious. I'm not being, like petty. I don't truly know what that means. It is a continent. It is truly like saying someone is from North America. where, how are we connected? I think that those are the things that we really have to start picking apart and finding those connectivities, finding those root kind of anchors that join us all. I remember when I first met Bonique, one of the things that really stood out to me about her was her understanding and her awareness of culture. I also learned the word akata. I also learned that my nose is very onibo. And saying those kinds of things to me was, kind of, I understood the context in which it was being said, but I've heard those things before, whether it's someone who is fully anchored in a supremacist structure telling me, oh, Felisa, your nose is very Caucasian. It's very keen, as if that's complimentary to me. Understanding that when I pull my DNA, that in the 1800s, Caucasian DNA of British and Irish and German and God knows what else was introduced into my lineage. And I would love to believe that that was a love story, but it was not. It was probably through rape and trauma that has been coded in the DNA of other Black people throughout our history. So I say all that to say that to understand Black people in America is to first understand the trauma. When I think about my ancestral home, I think about Mississippi, because that's where my grandfather came from. When you think about your ancestral home, you think about where you're from, Nigeria. When Bonique first had her birthday party and dressed, everyone came in gile and had their, their ceremonial dress on. I cried. I wept, not because it was just beautiful, but because it was a connection to a culture that I never had, that I never was able to participate in. And so when I talk about my culture, I talk about being from the East Side. I talk about what was actually going on in my home as a Black American. Now, I understand that that's not everyone's experience, nor do I mean to present it that way, but I think that we have to really not gloss over the idea that Black people in this country are not necessarily educated on our history because it's been hidden from us. To actually really find out the history of things, you'd have to go digging in places that probably are not accessible to you, not in Detroit public school systems and not in most urban areas. So you're probably on a college campus before you're even able to dig into meaty, weighty historical artifacts on that level. And you'd have to be inclined to do so. So I think that we have to continue to have conversations like this. We have to continue to push that narrative. We have to continue to find those commonalities and, like I said, those root connectivities. And I think, one of the things that actually bears true about what I'm saying is if you look at the statistics for interracial marriage, I know that you brought that up, Black women are least likely to marry outside of their race. That's anybody. I mean, anyone that's outside of the Black area. So it's
Okay.
for a reason.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, you have the floor. Go ahead.
Oh, no, it's just, I think that there are just different kind of drops that we've had throughout our whole existence that kind of shape our narrative and shape the way that we view things and shape the way that we interact. We have an inherent distrust of each other. I think that that is on purpose. I think that we have an inherent lack of understanding about each other. I think that that's on purpose. And I think that if we really and truly want to come to the table, more conversations like this are necessary without assumptions and without prejudice and without stereotypical throwbacks about who did what when. I've heard that, my ancestors were captured and therefore were weak. And so, that's something that, like, I don't even know how to respond to that. But it's something that is kind of in the narrative of, hey, at least I know who my ancestors are. I don't. I just have to assume that they're somewhere on the continent and they've done great things. So I think that when we kind of put those pieces together, it gives a clearer picture. We can't go forward without understanding what happened in the past.
All right. Thank you so much. Yes, if you want to make a comment, please raise your hand. I'm going to go to Miss Joyce. You do have the floor.
Thank you so much. I have to jump off to another meeting, so I'm just going to be very brief. Everything that you all have said inspired me to do a documentary. 2 African-American ladies traveled with me to Nigeria, and they had an immersive experience, no filters. It was spiritual, cultural, business. I put the link there on the chat so that you can see it. Everything you talked about, that's what inspired me to do it. And they talked about how their parents or friends didn't want them to go to Nigeria because they were afraid that such and such was going to happen to them. They talked about this in the documentary. But then what happened when they got to Nigeria? It was a totally different ball game. So I have to jump on a call. It's a free documentary. Watch it. Even Kings that hosted us, we were hosted by 3 different kings. So one of the ladies who happened to be a singer, she sang at one of the palaces, you know, at the King's Palace. So a whole lot of stuff happened. And so we are having a Q&A on Saturday. It's shameless plug because this has to do what we're talking about. I wanted to, people have said that this documentary is like a manual of what it means to be a Nigerian, an African, you know. So for me, that's high. And like I was saying, we've got the 3 kings, 2 kings coming who are going to talk about the experience. And you all are welcome to it. It's free. The links are there. And thank you so much, Akindele. Thank you for this. I'm glad that it's being recorded. I got to jump off and jump to another call. Thank you,
No problem.
everybody.
Thank you.
Mr. Kenneth,
I'm gonna go. Hold on 1 second. I got to go in order.
Okay.
I'm gonna go to Charles Basari. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Makidele. Thank you. Good evening, all. You know, just very quickly, I know Sister Joyce probably jumped off, but I just watched that documentary, and one of the things I liked about it was she actually took some African Americans back to Africa, and you know, they were able to experience that. The culture and the lifestyle out there, and I think this is more of what needs to happen in order to kind of heal the divide and breach the, you know, the gaps, right? In response to, you know, the gentleman from Michigan who made the comment, we all know it's a publicity stunt, and you know, my response is not to even feed it or pay any attention, because in doing so, we're just giving him more light, because when we put out statements, that's only when, you know, I had my friends contacting me to find out what was said, and people start doing those research in terms of that. But again, you know, we have always had these disagreements and these differences in our community, and we just by having these kind of dialogues, I think this is more of a solution to the issue, right? Where we can have the dialogues, and we can have, you know, open forum with everybody from both sides involved, and that way we, you know, come to a better understanding of the cultures and what's actually going on. What I will say is, you know, I know for a long time, I think there's been a shift of power, where, you know, for most people who grew up in America in, you know, the early 80s and 70s, they faced, like, you know, deep discrimination, especially from the African Americans. And now with Africa becoming more, being African is becoming more sexy, as I say, with more awareness of African culture. It was that somebody have a comment?
No, go ahead. You have go ahead.
All right, thanks. Yeah. So what I'm saying is, with more African culture coming out into the mainstream, with the music, movies, and the food, you know, with this so-called Fufu challenge, Africa is more in the mainstream, and I think there's an element of you know, some people are feeling threatened. I wouldn't say everybody, because I mean, in terms of ADOS, I agree with ADOS as a descriptor, but I know some people will try and jump on it and use it as a you know, as a tool to voice their prejudice. So for ADOS, that's just Americans descended of slaves that was mentioned earlier by Akindele, and this is what's going around now, and it kind of plays into what I call the new media, where opinion becomes fact. People have platforms on, you know, social media, Clubhouse, YouTube, and so on, where they start voicing their opinions and putting it out as fact, and none of it is fact, because once you start doing some research or do a brief, you know, digging into your history, you start to find out that, I always say Africans as well, there's a preconceived notion that, Africans we retained our culture, and African Americans were robbed of their culture. But I always say, colonialism was just as bad as slavery, if not worse, because it was a mental damage that's been done to us that a lot of us don't even realize that's there. But we have more in common than separates us. So those are the things that I want us to focus on. How can we bridge the gap? How can we bring each other together? And platforms like this, like I said, is like one of the few steps that we can take to educate each other and to kind of understand each other's culture. And definitely we have to give respect where respect is due. The African Americans that came before, the civil rights, from the civil rights movement, even to contributions to African countries getting their liberation, we have to kind of, respect the African American involvement in Africa getting its liberation and independence from the colonial masters. So, like I said, we start to tell these stories and we start to find ways to put out, like, ways where we've always been involved, and we don't have this new revisionist history that's happening now, where the younger feeling like, oh, Africans just always hated African Americans, or African Americans don't like Africans, and those kind of stories that's now spreading, and I call it's opinion being stated as fact. So I'm gonna leave it there and just kind of hear from everybody else in the room. But I think it's a great discussion, and I thank you guys very much for this platform.
Thank you. I'm going to go straight to Liz Rogers and then Bishop. Liz, you do have the floor.
Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to underscore a couple of points that were made. When Ms. Joyce talked about taking 2 African-American women to the continent, I went to Nigeria, and the experience that I had was completely different than what I expected. And the same way that she mentioned that for the sisters who went over, there were folks at home saying you shouldn't go, and they were afraid that certain things would happen. The exact same thing happened to me. There were 2 groups of people that I checked in with every day, like sending a text saying, I'm okay, I'm good. And they were like, what are you doing? And who are you with? And like one group even would ask me questions that only I would answer so that they could make sure that I had not been kidnapped, that nothing had happened to me. But having an open mind, I think, is key. And I also wanted to underscore what Felicia said about communication and how important it is. We can look at each other, and because we have similar skin tones and because we have similar structure in terms of, our faces and our build and that kind of thing, we can sometimes make assumptions that we understand each other or that we know one another. And sometimes Black folks can approach each other with an alarming degree of familiarity. But when we talk to each other, especially when Black folks are talking to folks from the continent, I think we have to realize that we really are educating each other about each other. There are some major cultural differences that if we approach with respect and an open mind and kind of like a blank slate, realizing that what we've learned about each other in American culture is probably wrong and is probably fraught with the kind of disrespect that this country generally has for folks who have chocolate in their skin. So I just think if we kind of rewrite our own history, and if we approach each other with a blank slate and an open heart and an open mind, I think that we will find so much about each other that there is to respect, and not just, having conversations, but actually like hanging out with one another and just like having a good time and learning how to see us for who we are. And also to realize that just because I have a certain experience as an African-American woman doesn't mean that I speak for every other African-American woman in this country. We have not had a monolithic experience as Black folks, and I am who I am. And I think that we have to learn how to get to know one another and respect each other, both for our individuality and also for who we are as a collective. That's my comment.
All right. Thank you, Liz. Bishop, you do have the floor.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. Where do I start from? I'm going to share more personal experiences, but most of the speakers have said almost the same thing. But we cannot negate the fact that We have cultural difference, not just being in America, even way back from Nigeria. An average Yoruba man does not understand the culture of an Igbo person, because as a Yoruba person, if I want to greet my dad, it's different from how an Igbo person greet his dad. And if he greet my dad like that, we're gonna have problem. So there's a level of culture in us that is different from an environment that we find ourselves. So we always have a tie to say, part of me is Nigerian, part of me is Cameroon or whatever. Now, having said that, I think I'm one of the most Nigerian that has crossover within the African community, because what African American community, because what I've done was immerse myself in the culture, understand the culture. Initially have cultural shock from some of the people that I relate with. One of the first major experience I had was a neighbor telling me that, come on, man, you've never been to the pen before. I was trying to understand what pen mean. Later, I found out it's jail. He was telling me, damn, you got to go to the pen. You got to have some muzzles. You're going to eat for free. Now, that is one guy that I don't understand what he was really talking about, but he has so much pride in what he was trying to tell me. But do I see every African American as a guy that want to go to jail? No. Now, I've run businesses where I have had to hire African American. Now, I find it difficult to understand. You see, we have to all understand that we come from a place that give us something that is different from where we are. But once we know where we are, we start marrying the two together. Now, I hire bodyguard who was supposed to travel with me with a recording artist on a tour. These guys refuse to fly. They say, hell no, I ain't gonna get on the plane. These are personal experiences. I was like, damn, how do we fly from here to New York to LA? You have to get on the plane. They've never been to the airport. I find that so difficult to believe. I'm not taking anything away from them, but I find it difficult. You know, the media paints a different picture about America. So when you get to America, it's different ballgame. I'm going to just keep it short so that because it's a conversation we have for a long time. Now, I took Evander Holyfield to Nigeria. Before, this was Lagos at 50. This was about 3 years ago. Now, before we left, that was supposed to be his second time of going to Nigeria. He said, he was telling us before we get on the plane that his first time going to Nigeria, politicians in America were telling him, don't go to Nigeria. Black people, that it's full of this, it's full of that. Well, okay. He called the State Department himself. They were like, the advisory is better this time around. But when he got to Nigeria, he had a different experience. Now, my own experience with him, we went to Nigeria. When we got to Nigeria, he don't want to stay in Lekki, the Eyebrow area. He don't want to stay in where all the glamorous houses are. He said, show me that place they don't show on TV. And guess what? We went straight to the hood. Do you know the funniest thing? Everybody out there knows him. Like Evander, they almost hijack him from us with love. Here's the deal. Unfortunately, what we need to people that really need to hear this, they are not on this phone. I have not dated a Nigerian woman since 2005. I have always loved my African American women. I have always lived among them. I had a nightclub where I have 100 people working every night. 75% of them are African American for 5 years. So I relate with them. I had a car lot before the nightclub. I was so interested in the culture. They see love from me that my African American workers, they don't eat American food. They accepted my food. They enjoy the food. They enjoy the culture. What I'm saying that we are the agent of change that we need. We have to be the one to give them that experience that they had before they meet you as a person. Because if they go past you and they see have the same experience, that means you didn't change the narrative. We have to be the one to change the narrative. But let me end it on this note. Now, how many of us came from Nigeria and we've ever even had to visit straight up hood, the inner city, the urban city before? We don't do it. We come to America, we want to stay where all the above average class, because that's what is in our head. We don't want to go to, I have had to go somewhere, you know, I was doing training for a lot of government officials overseas. I had a cell phone that the number was given to someone else when I traveled overseas for a while. In my bid to retrieve the phone, it was someone who lived straight up for lack of I don't know how many of us live in Georgia on this phone, but it's a place called Bankhead. Bankhead is like the core of the inner city. Like you want to talk about the craziest part of Baltimore. Now, when I went to meet this person, I offered to give that money so that they can give me the SIM back, because all the attendees for that training were calling the number. So this person agreed to meet us. But do you know, because I had someone that showed up in a suit, these guys refused to talk to us. And I was like, no, he's not a cop. They're like, they don't give a damn. You need to go back to the car. I was shocked that they have a separate experience looking at a guy dressed in a suit. But guess what? I didn't judge them. That experience fascinated me more. We became friends afterwards. Because of that, I drove through a place that I see people that look like me, and I try to tell them this is who I am, this is what we need to do with each other. And I'm excited today that I'm a better person personally, and I've been able to influence a lot of people to do the same in our community. Because when you ask an average Nigerian, how many of your friends are non-Nigerian? In most cases, it is always 1%. The rest are Nigerian. So I'll leave it at that.
All right, my brother. Thank you so much for those for your impactful comments. I'm gonna jump right into Brother Mayo. You do have the floor, sir.
Thank you so much. Good evening to everybody. I'm gonna just try to keep this as short as I can, and try to respond in generality to all the things I've heard tonight. I'm glad we're having this conversation. I'm glad the sisters doing documentaries, and I kind of see like a lot of progress in just conversations we're having. Bottom line, the number one thing is terminologies. I think that someday, hopefully, we can come up with terminologies that will make us better in the sense of identify group identity. You know, I use first and second generation African American versus multi-generation African Americans, because once you land in the soil of America or North America, and you go through the airport and you get your citizenship, you start to have kids and all this stuff. Most likely you're African American, because most of your kids are probably not going to want to go back. And if they go back, they're just going back because, you know, like they might want to move back or whatever. We have to look at ourselves in some way as citizens of the planet. At least I shouldn't say we have to. I'm recommending that we look at ourselves as citizens of the planet. And the part of us that makes us Africa is the fact that we're Black. You know, Black is global. I'm a student of Marcus Garvey, Kwame Nkrumah, Malcolm X. So for me, it's the mindset of saying us and them. So those kind of things, when we say us and them, too, I've been cringing every time I heard that today. Or Africans or African Americans. I'm like, who, we got to understand that at the end of the day, and maybe, I might be the one that's wrong, who knows who's right and wrong, but it's just, it's about perception. The perception you have is what you're going to continue to carry along. We are people. Let's love people. If you love people enough, they're Black, you get a sense that we all deal with the same struggle all around the globe. When African teams were playing in the last two World Cups, the one in Germany, they were throwing bananas on the field. So racism is global. We deal with the same struggle around the globe. Slavery and colonization are two brothers of different two birds of different titles. So I don't know why we often seem like we measuring our scars. Like I got bigger scars than you do. I mean, so those are some of the things that we have. But for the ones that know better, you got to do better. If you know better, act like the adults that you are. Don't get involved in the debate of there's so much debate and I remember when I was in college, playing ball over there. Some of my teammates we got in a fight, and the defense and offense was fighting, and I realized that when it became my time and I got in a fight at some point, some of my defensive line guys will fight. They would just stand out there. They don't want to ask them what's going on. They say, "Well, your people sold our people to slavery." So I mean, but I didn't. The next day, I just could not see myself buying into that and still joining the same mindset. You got to think above that. So we all have stories, but you got to move on. You got to try to be the bigger person. You got to try to think, how can I get everybody else who don't understand how to understand that we're all one. So again, I like the discussion. We got to keep it going. The issues that I have is how we call each other, even the Akata name and all that kind of stuff. That I'm like those I get really upset when I hear that part. And and we've had comedians make fun of African. So one other thing I want to talk about is the stigmatization of Africa. Africa has enough stigma from white supremacy that we don't have to add to it. I mean, as much as I love Jamie Foxx, and I love the series that he had in Africa and all that, but I just wish those people would say those jokes on that side and also say positive jokes. So there's ways you can positively joke about us and our heritage and what we're all about. And I mean by us, I mean all Black people. We can joke about the good and the bad, whatever. So. But when you focus on the negativity and put the joke on that, then you add into that stigma of being African and being Black. So we have to be mindful. The whole thing about the food challenge. I saw the video with the lady who was acting like she was about to throw up and call it dog food or whatever. Maybe her boyfriend called it dog food. It's what it is. I'm glad that she got the backlash she got. Hopefully there are more positive videos. So again, I'm joining the message of we gotta be positive, but I think it has to be intentional. And when we see anybody doing the us and them or using those kind of terminologies or stereotyping, we have to step in as much as we can in a very nice way to tell them that we have to stop. We're all one. So that's what I wanted to add in.
Thank you. Before I move on to the next person, I just want to add this. Many people do know, I'm the national political director for the Nigerian American Public Affairs Committee. I'm also the president of the Global African Business Association. And one of the things when we started our journey in Inkster, Michigan, about 7 years ago, we launched, we wanted to change the community. We wanted to be partners within the community. And early on, the politicians there asked us, "Are you trying to change Inkster into an Africa town?" And I said, "Well, what does that mean?" "Well, move your people into our city." I said, "Well, Africans already live in Inkster. What do you mean by that?" The fear that these representatives had about our platform was so interesting that what we ended up doing was we had to be committed to being community partners with our African American brothers and sisters. So what we ended up doing was we ended up joining the Downtown Development Authority, which I served as chair. I was elected to the library board, joining the Economic Development Corporation out there in the city of Inkster, and really making some things happen to the point where, as president of that library board, we led an effort to build a new library from the ground up. Well, not from the ground up, but build a new library in the city of Inkster. And that's how we built trust with the community, letting these folks know and letting people know that we are all one. It's not us coming in as a new group trying to take over the city and all those things. That's not what we're about. So a part of the issue in breaking down those stereotypes is really just getting to know each other at a community level, being engaged in community activities. Yes, there may be some things you may disagree with, but that's okay. We're all human. So, you know, and also when you're talking about politics, I struggle with our local and state, in many cases, federal politicians because they really don't understand the connection between Africa and the United States as it pertains to local communities. Economically, they really don't understand. In terms of the music, they get it. In terms of the cultural connections, most of the time we get it. But when it comes to like rebuilding communities, through my personal experience, it's been a disconnect, and that's something we have to work on as a community, both African American and African, to show that we're all stakeholders in this movement. I'm going to jump to Stephen, and then I'm going to go to Tama. Stephen, you do have the floor.
Thank you very much. I wanted to piggyback on what Maya was pointing out about, like, we are all Black people, and that should be the narrative. The whole Africans in America and African Americans is pretty much like the narrative that is killing us. You know, if we look back in time, the struggle for civil rights brought about the strive in Africa for independence. When Blacks are liberated in one area, it affects the rest of the Black community around the world. And just like you rightly pointed out, we that are from Black immigrants do not get engaged in community issues and development. We come with a different privilege that we do. When we make it, we think like we're better than the ones that are still struggling. The struggle of every community that we live in is a reflection of us going forward. Just because we're benefiting from it today, our kids are going to still be part of that community. They don't have so much strong root where we originally came from. So that thing that we avoid because we're making money is still going to chase our kids around. So we should endeavor to keep pushing more people to be involved in local politics, in state level politics, in district level issues. And that is the one thing that will bring about that unity amongst all Black people. Africans in America and African Americans, we are all the same. Thank you very much.
I'm going to go straight to Tama Smith. Thank you very much, Stephen. Tama, you do have the floor.
Hi, it's me again. I had a question for Segun, but it looks like he has left because he triggered another question I had that I don't understand. So if individuals have children, then this question would be for you. So I have a lot of, mostly my friends are Nigerian, and mostly of them fathers are Nigerian and their mothers are African American. And one of the things that I don't understand is when we say we want to connect with the culture and things like that, I don't understand why their native language isn't taught to them. So that was one of the questions I had for Segun before I noticed that he left, was that he said, he doesn't, really know Yoruba. So my question was going to be to him, well, is he trying to learn it now? Is he, trying to teach his children? And if anyone else on the phone has, children with it, just as an example, one of their parents are Nigerian. If not, like, are you, trying to instill that in your children? Because I have heard before that it is a lost language and people don't want to lose the language, but yet I just find it weird that, like I said, myself, I have friends that have, you know, Nigerian fathers and their mothers are African American, and sometimes it could be vice versa, but I'm just talking about the people I know. So I just don't understand, like, why is there not a emphasis on teaching your children the native language? If anyone can answer that question.
Somebody want to tackle that real fast?
Yes,
Right.
I can try.
Hold on. Who's this?
Steven.
Oh, go. Okay, hold on. Let me get Eero. Eero, go ahead.
Yes, hi, Tama. Well, I'm actually a first generation born in America where both my parents are Nigerian. And that issue did arise in my family as well. My father wanted me to learn the language. My mother was against it. And the reason why my mother was against teaching us the language was because of the discrimination in America. So as a child, in my kindergarten class, even though the only language I knew was English, I was almost classified as an ESL child because my name was simply Irama. Not because I didn't speak English or anything, but just the discrimination that was going on during that time for anybody who was not an English speaker, or that being your first language, or if you had any other type of cultural differences. Those were some of the reasons why my mother opted against teaching us the language. So a lot of children that were not originally born in Nigeria, or end up moving, or whatever the case is, we don't know the original language. With that being some of the reasons, not saying that's the only reason, but that is one of the major reasons why we weren't taught well, for me, Benin and Yoruba, because my parents speak both in the household. Now that I am an adult, I have taken upon myself to learn the language as much as I can. I do understand when people are around me speaking Benin, I know what they are saying, and I can translate because I can hear the language because I've been listening to it growing up all my life. But as an adult now, I do wish I spoke the language, because when I see other people, especially like being in New York, I've been exposed to other white people where they're not white Americans, but maybe they're Russian, or maybe they're from Scandinavia, or whatever the case is, and they have their own language. And just having that, wishing that I could have, whatever the mother tongue is for my identity, I wish I did speak it. So that's just what my input on that.
All right. Thank you so much. Elizabeth, you have the floor.
Okay, hello everyone. And I'm kind of like pinpoint on different topics that were talked about already. But one I would like to talk about is so I'm married to an African American. He's from Detroit, East Side Detroit. And when we had our children, I made it a point that they had Nigerian first names. And my sensibility was that, well, the last name is Bridges, they're gonna be Bridges, but I would like that when they grow up, if ever someone hears a name, they'll say, "Oh, you have a different name. Are you from Nigeria?" And they'll be able to connect with that. Whereby, like my last born, his first name is Andrew Bridges. Unless he says it himself that has that identity of Nigerian, if just hearing his name, they wouldn't know that he's from Nigeria. So there's a difference where I think, and I don't know how to really articulate it, but I feel that there is a sense of belonging, or kind of like, I won't call it favor, that if he goes into a place where he's surrounded by Nigerians, that once they hear the name, a Nigerian name, they'll give him more, something more, or some more benefits because he identifies. And just as human beings, we do that anyway. It was probably more intentional on my part on that. With the language, I'm not teaching them the language because I don't know it fluently, but they do hear it with the music around us. We play the music. My parents speak it to them. There's these different apps, Yoruba 101, where they're learning it as well. I did have an issue with my last born. He's 2, he just turned 2, and he wasn't even speaking English. And one of the things the teacher asked was, do you guys speak 2 languages in the home? I said yes. They said probably he's confused because he's hearing 2 different languages. He's confused. So we kind of stopped, and now he's speaking English really well. But that was another reason why we probably like laid load on giving them that extra language to learn.
All right. Sounds good. I'm going to go straight to Alexander. You do have the floor, sir. Going once, going twice. All right. I'm going to go straight to Charles Basari. You do have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Akindele. And I just wanted to speak to, I think the last, not the last question that was asked, but I forgot who asked the question about not speaking the language. And earlier on, I did mention, some of these are effects of colonialism. I was born in Nigeria. Both my parents are Yoruba, but I grew up in Nigeria speaking English. I understood the language, and I spoke 3 languages actually. I understood 3 languages: the Hausa, Yoruba, and Igbo. But I couldn't speak any of the language. And part of this was among the elites. It's like, I remember my parents would bring me out and show us off, like, bring myself and my siblings out to show us off that we spoke perfect English. And even moving to England when I was about 11, that was when I changed my name to Charles. So it's like colonialism kind of robbed us of an appreciation of our culture and valuing our culture, right? And you find that in a lot of African households where we try to assimilate to different cultures in order to succeed. So that's those are conversations like, again, like I said, we need to have open dialogue, and to understand that we're a lot of what we're doing, a lot of what's happening is we're fighting for scraps, right? Where there's not enough for one community and they feel like another community is coming and taking it away from them. But recognizing that we need to work together to create more for ourselves rather than depend on the existing systems. And in those ways, we're able to find our strengths, or discover our strengths. Thanks. I have to jump off because I have another meeting starting shortly, but this is a great interview. I will definitely look out for the recording as well.
All right, thank you so much, Charles. We're coming up on 7:17. We're going to start winding down this wonderful discussion. I'm going to ask the next couple of people to just keep their comments to 2 minutes, and then we'll start wrapping up. I'm going to start with Alexander. You do have the floor, sir. Can you hear us?
Hello? Hello?
Yes, sir. You have the floor. 2 minutes.
Yeah, sorry, I'm driving and I thought I had my audio on. Well, thanks everybody for the comments I've been listening to. And the thing about language, it's even happening within the Nigerian or African community. And Mr. Busari just alluded to it when he said colonialism had to do with that's why we're all speaking English. And English is being spoken in the home. So we do not have our languages being imparted to our children. Those are all part of the conversation. But this forum, I think it was put together so that we discuss the big picture of the situation between Africans and African Americans. I think this is not a conversation for only today. It should continue. And it should continue on such a forum that it should be out there in the public. I would like it to be something that is out in not only during Black History Month, but even the media should catch it, so that every community of African Americans who were born here in the US, or those Africans, we who came from Nigeria or Africa, we should have a broad knowledge. It shouldn't stop, because it's a big, big issue. And it's something that a lot of us need to be aware of, the differences and why that difference is there. The why is very important. And remember his name, some professor was saying some very denigrating things about Nigerians. And if you look deep into it, because they do not know why that is so, it will be accepted that Nigerians are arrogant. No, because you went to school and you have just, there are differences. Why are the African Americans, like the bishop was making a comment, he was right on point. But then we have to know, why are those things so? Those are the things that we all need to take back and keep thinking about, and we can come back again in this type of forum and profile some solutions. Why are these things so? These are the reasons. If we know why.
Excuse me, Mr. Alexander, Mr. Alexander, I got to cut you short. We're running out of time. Thank you. Excuse me. I'm going to go over to Stephen. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to make a quick response to the person that asked about mixed family where they're not speaking the language to their kids. I guess it has to do with the partners on their agreement, because, for example, if you're speaking a Nigerian language to your kid and your wife is American, Black American, and they might, if they don't understand the language, then you have to end up being in a situation where, like, you speak to your kids and then you have to translate that to English, and it makes the conversation kind of like funny and weird. So people tend to, like, step away from, like, being in that position. That's why for some reason they don't really speak the language until maybe a family member comes in, and maybe grandma, grandpa, and they're the ones doing that. The next thing that I wanted to touch was the issue about some school talking about a kid being confused about language. I'm not here to really give an advice, but being raised by a psychologist and a guidance counselor, and, like, hearing them talk to people about such things, there's no confusion when it comes to language. Kids grow at the pace of their understanding. And if your kid is not speaking any, doesn't mean they're not assimilating any or all the languages that they hear, and they don't understand what teachers are telling them. So don't let them push you to stop what you're doing.
All right. Thank you so much, Stephen. Iro, you have the last word for the evening. You have the floor.
I feel special being able to close this out. So, so I really wanted to say, like, when it comes to bridging the gap with the diaspora across, the globe, when it comes to Africans and all Africans. So, I like to think that, first of all, the two things that's going to help us grow as a collective community is, one, the mindset, and two, communication. Those are going to be the two main things we have to focus on. So, like, as we've been talking, everybody's been talking about, colonialism, this, the way things are portrayed, that those are all mindset type of issues. So regardless of who you feel is the initiator, we all have to own our own mindsets and be mindful and be intentional on being more open and giving us space and grace to be able to accept one another. So especially me in my personal experience, being a child who's grown up here in America all my life, where, my family at home doesn't think I'm as Nigerian because I'm here, and people here don't feel like I'm as American because I have a Nigerian name. I've always been in this middle place where it's like, I see it from both sides and I get it from all sides, So, like, being respectful of one another, being open and wanting to, put down our guards, because what blocks us in this building this bridge is that we all have these walls. And we know, especially with this past administration, the only way you bridge together is if you put down the walls, because horizontal walls just form bridges. So we have to be, open, and we have to be intentional about learning, on both sides, like, what is it to be African? What is it to be American? Where are the intersectionality? So I look forward to working with everybody, and I really appreciate this opportunity, this space, so that we can all talk about it, get some of these ideas out, and, as the days continue, hopefully it will grow into, what would be our big Black family.
Thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and close. I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much for everyone being on this conference call, this town hall on this very important subject. My closing statement is basically this: we are all Black, regardless of where we come from. We're all Black. We have a job to do to empower and impact the community in which we live in, not just for ourselves, but for our children and our children's children, because we have to build a future and an inheritance for them. And so with that said, I'm going to turn this back over to our chairwoman, Bonike Lee. She's going to close us out. And thank you.
You're muted. You're muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Akindele, and thank you everyone that participated. The stereotypes, ignorance, misconceptions, and grudges have overshadowed strained relationships between these two groups. So whatever beliefs both groups hold against each other come from the larger American society, predominantly the mainstream media, and the United States educational institution, which is dominated by Eurocentric perspectives. So on the part of the mainstream media, it has not helped in bridging the gap between these two camps. Instead, it is at the forefront of commotion by bombarding Americans, particularly African Americans, with negative images, Africa and Africans, which many African Americans don't want to associate with. Cultural differences have to be accounted in the strained relationship between these two groups, and African Americans have to take it to themselves to learn about the African continent, its people, and their respective cultures. Likewise, African immigrants have to learn about their African American past, discrimination, and exclusion from social, political, economic arena. Both groups should refrain from judging one another without direct or actual experience of the problem that seems to divide them. In order to achieve an amicable relationship and understanding between African immigrants and African Americans, both groups need to reject negative stereotypes. And I'll just say, let's just get along. Thank you for coming, and we'll be in touch with you soon with more programming.
Thank you. And thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Good night.